Welcome in to another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, joined by my editor, Jim Aiello. And Jim, we actually pushed the pod back a day because I had some things going on at the apartment building, had to
We knew.
get some
Yeah, we
flooding
knew.
issues going on. But yeah, sources said that JT's deal would land today. But in all seriousness, what a start to the morning for myself and for you as well in your central time zone, a little hour earlier than me. But the news there, which I'm sure many of you all have heard by now, is that Jonathan Taylor signed a 2 year, or has agreed to, he hasn't signed it officially just yet, but has agreed to a 2 year, $44 million extension worth up to $47 million and includes $39 million guaranteed. So we felt like this was a possibility, Jim,
Mhm.
especially after some things happened earlier this week with Bijan Robinson, the superstar in Atlanta. So, what was your reaction to the domino effect of Bijan Robinson getting his deal done and then JT getting the rare third contract with the same team that drafted him?
Yeah, so the first part I'll say is that once Bijan got done, I was like, oh, this is happening within the next week. In fact, after Bijan got done, the first thing I did was went into the pre-write that you had done and made sure it was like up to date, and I had added a couple of little notes and things like that
You
to
mean
make
to
sure
tell me
we
I
were
didn't write all of that in like 5 minutes? People were a little surprised that we got that up so fast. But yes, that had been sitting in the hopper for
for a
about two
while.
months.
Yeah, that was a long time coming. Yeah, so you did that before. I think you took some PTO, which was nice to have. But yeah, I went and checked it. I was, as soon as Bijan went done, I was like, okay. And I honestly, I was even tempted to put in. I knew it would confuse somebody if they posted, but I was even tempted to put in like 21 million, 22, because I was pretty confident. I knew it was going to come in a little under Bijan. I just wasn't sure how much. But anyway, my actual first instinct when the deal done was to James was to pat us on the back, because I think you and I talked about this maybe a few months ago about the best case scenario for Jonathan Taylor and the Colts was to get him some new money, guarantee those most of the money for the next 2 years, but not for the Colts not to overextend themselves and sign him into his 30s, or even to his 30 season, which is what they just did. Like, they did it exactly the way I think it worked out really well for them. I think it worked out really well for Jonathan Taylor. He gets the third contract. He gets to be one of the highest paid running backs in the NFL, and they don't have to worry about his age 30 season. They're paying him right now 27. Extension kicks in next year when he's 28. One more year after that, he's 29. Then they can reassess and see where they're at after that. I think that's beautiful work done by the Colts, and it's smart for Jonathan Taylor. Like, maybe he's Derrick Henry, right? And he'll get another nice contract at 29 going into his 30s. Who knows? But right now he makes significant, life changing, like generational money again, really, but and takes care of his family for the foreseeable future. So I thought it was a great deal for both sides. It made a lot of sense. I mean, again, I think Jonathan Taylor probably could have pushed for that age 30 season if he really wanted to, but like, there's also the chance the guaranteed money wouldn't be as good as it was, and they could cut him in that final year. So anyway, I when I saw the details of the deal, it made a ton of sense to me. I think he's paid where he belongs in the market, which I think will end up being third, behind Jonathan Taylor, and when eventually Jahmyr Gibbs gets done, which I think is about where he belongs. Do you agree? I mean, do you feel like that's about where he should slot in terms of running backs right now?
I do think that because prior to his deal being agreed to, I'm looking at it right now. JT was one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eighth when it came to annual average on his contract. Crazy
Yep.
enough, you look at a guy like Jeremiah Love who just joined the NFL. He was right behind him,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a number three pick in Arizona. So deserving of a raise and somebody who is in a much different situation than he was the last time he tried to get this deal done. And I know I probably ruffled some feathers among the fan base when I said he should just hold in to get a new deal done. But that was under the assumption of maybe the Colts don't want to perhaps pay him. But it seemed like this was a much more like amicable approach to everything, whether that was from Carla Arce Gordon to Chris Ballard to JT and his agent. There was no, Twitter back and forth. There was no bus meeting. Nothing was really all that eventful besides just getting the deal done. And I thought JT, who was typically, you know, company line, doesn't really give too much to the media, he kind of broke rank on Tuesday after the news came out about Bijan's deal. And to kind of set the scene for you all, that deal comes out at about, I want to say maybe like 9:30. Practice starts at 10. Who knows if he knew before he went on the field, but he basically told us after practice, "Oh guys, you guys just kind of told me. I don't think we were the first ones to tell him. I think he probably knew." as soon as he either was
What?
walking to the
No.
field or leaving the field. Like we were not the first ones to break the news to him. But Jim, I thought for a second there he really wasn't going to go there because we probably threw 4 or 5 or 6 questions at him in a row about Bijan's deal and what it can mean for him. And at first, every single answer was, I'm so happy for him. He deserves it. That's my guy. Like, we're not super close, but, running back got to stick together. And then I believe it was Stephen Holder of ESPN, longtime Colts reporter. He asked him something like, does this deal with Bijan keep you optimistic with where you're at with the Colts? And his response was, yeah, I got to call my agent. And I'm like, oh, this is gold. Like, this is the
Yeah,
quote
we
everyone is
got
kind
him.
of waiting on. This is what we need. This is, we talk about leads and stories, like what you're going to start your story with. And even I had to do a video reaction to it. I'm like, this is the
Hmm.
video. This is what we want to kind of get into. And so he kind of broke rank and got real for a second and said, hey, I got to call my agent and see where things are. Now that you guys have kind of informed me of what's going on with Bijan. So don't get me wrong. JT's a great dude, but I also don't think he's a naive dude. He comes off like
No.
that or he tries to pretend like he is, but he's a very smart guy. Of course, he knows all about the money and the running back market. And what's fascinating, Jim, is that we're seeing this sort of resurgence from what I would consider the running back market being super depleted or really just, standoffish 3 years ago when JT tried to get paid the first time. I mean, we look at it back at his deal, he was scratching and clawing for a 3 year, $42 million deal. And I get that the cap has gone up since then and all that.
Yeah.
But now he gets a 2 year, $44 million deal. So more money overall on a shorter deal. I think it's more guaranteed money as well up front. And again, I think it sends a great message to your locker room and the guys on the roster as
Yes.
well when you pay one of your guys, Jim. And I know we talked about it as well, and maybe you could dive into a little bit, but like his numbers are pretty ridiculous. I think he's at 90.5 rushing yards per game in his career. That's fifth all time, and the four guys ahead of him are all Hall of Famers. So I don't want to sit here and act like JT is like a good running back. He is a great running back and one of the very best in the NFL. And now, until I assume Jamar Gibbs signs his deal, he is the second highest paid running back based off his new money. So again, $22 million annually. That's pretty great stuff for a running back who has been pretty great the last few years.
Yeah. So that's actually I want to point this out real quick, and this is maybe just like a PSA for fans in general because I feel like it's not understood well enough that the money, like we were talking about it this morning with the money for JT doesn't actually kick in till next year. Like I think a lot of people freaked out about the Zay Flowers deal, the $35 million he got.
Yeah.
But like what people I don't think factor in, and again, this is a little less Colts related, but relevant to I think maybe a Josh Downs conversation later. Um, that money's not kicking in for 2 years. Like he's still playing out 2 more years on his deal. It doesn't like he's not going to be making $35 million a year until 2 years from now, and the receiver market's going to change a whole bunch. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, Zay Flowers not the number like he's getting paid more than CD Lamb. He's not CD Lamb." Correct. We all know this. And he won't be getting paid where CD Lamb is right now for another 2 years. And in 2 years, the market's going to have gone up a ton, and Zay Flowers
Preach. Yep.
will slot into where he belongs more likely. So it looks crazy now, but it's not as crazy as it may seem. So I it's something to remember when you talk about these kind of things. So again, it's different with Jonathan Taylor. He'll be making $22 million next year. I don't know what his actual cap. Maybe the Colts might maybe messed with the way he'll be. It'll be paid out over the
Yeah.
next 2 years. But $22 million essentially is AAV, and that will put him as the number two or number three highest paid running back in the NFL starting next year. Right now, this won't change where he's at currently. So it's good to know and kind of understand how this works in terms of what extensions are like. Most of the times, the extensions are not reworking the current year of the deal. Most of the times, the extensions are adding years on to the end of
Right.
the deal that you have already agreed to. So, to your point, though, like I think the biggest point in Jonathan Taylor's favor, obviously, like I think we all know he's an elite running back. I think we all know that by any measure or anyone talking about it, like he's at worst a top 5 or 6 running back, right in the NFL. Like I don't think if the Colts are going into this with his agent Malki Kawa and they're debating how much to pay him and all that stuff. I don't think anyone's really doubting. Like they're not going to argue. Well, he's not as talented as whatever. Like maybe you could argue Bijan or Gibbs, but like that's pretty much it. Like everyone is understanding that that's where he is. Where I think Jonathan Taylor made his money, and you've pointed out over and over again in the last few weeks when you've written about it and talked about it in video, is his durability. Like that was an issue early in his career. There was some concerns with him coming in from Wisconsin that he had a ton of he had a lot of tread on the tires when he came in from Wisconsin, so that was a concern. But listen, like he played 17 games last year. He played and even the year before, he only played 14 games. He still took the ball 300 times. Like he has put up 300 carries 2 years in a row. 300 plus carries, I should say, 2 years in a row. Like he has proved to be durable. Now, there are people that would tell you it's a bad bet that he's going to do 300 carries again. And I actually think the Colts would probably be wise to maybe not try to put that much of a workload on him. And you wrote recently that Seth McGowan is looking maybe more like a number two running
Yeah,
back for this team. They could give him a little more responsibility. You still have DJ Giddens. So like they have some people to take the load off of him going forward. But I really, really do think that like in terms of elite production, he's proved it from the moment he got to the NFL, really. Like he took over this backfield with Marlon Mack, who was a very good running back at the time, got hurt, but like he took it over pretty quickly, has proven himself to be one of the best backs in the NFL. Talent was never the issue. I think it was always going to be durability and paying an older running back. And honestly, like he's shown no slides of slowing down. He's played 31 games the last 2 seasons, taken over 600 carries. Like I think he proved what he needed to prove to get paid. And the Colts, like you said, I think that's the last point. You made a great point about it. Is you can Chris Ballard can walk into the locker room and look around like and not be afraid of getting dirty glances from people because he's taking care of the people who have earned their new money.
exactly. And to piggyback off the Chris Ballard mention, I think this also lets us know that he does
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to extend players, perhaps beyond his own tenure in stewardship of the franchise. He's in the final year of his contract. He ain't getting no extension. And so the Colts basically said, and Carly Ursay Gordon basically said, we believe in JT enough that we'll keep him around even if it's not a guarantee that you'll be here. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
factor. And also another weird kind of wrinkle I've thought about, Jim, and maybe I'm just nerding out too much, but and of course you never can see the future, but it's almost better if you're a top running back to be a second round pick than a first round pick. Because
Yeah.
I had a couple of fans ask me, like, wait a second, he's only 27, he's already on his third deal, like he's gonna be less than 30 before his third deal is, when his third year is already up. I was like, yeah, because he doesn't have that fifth year option
Yep.
like first round picks do.
Yep.
So unlike Bijan Robinson and Jamar Gibbs, who are trying to get deals done 2 years in advance because of the fifth year option as first round picks, he didn't have that. And so it allowed him to kind of hit the free agency market quicker and then get paid quicker and more often. So it's not like I can give JT credit for that. Perhaps looking at his career now, he should have been a first round pick given what
Uh-huh.
he's done. But it's like if you hit on a second round pick or anybody outside of that first round, if you're the player, yes, you didn't get as much money on the front end being a first round pick, but you definitely can make it back up. And that's what he's done as of late. So I'm excited to see, him with another season with the Colts. He's about 1,600 yards away from being the all-time leading rusher for the franchise. He's trailing the one and only Edgerrin James. And so it's possible. We'll see. He was on pace to have even more yards last year. The second half of last year got tanked
Yeah.
because of the injury to Daniel Jones. But again, if Daniel Jones can stay healthy, it's a big if. But if he can stay healthy, I think JT is due for another big season. Obviously, if he can stay healthy himself. So again, congrats to JT. Well deserved. But I know you mentioned Seth McGowan there a little bit during our back and forth, Jim, and I do want to pivot to some of the players who stood out throughout the first week and a half plus of training camp. And Seth McGowan is one of them, Jim. And feel free to, ask me anything or,
Yeah.
have some observations because I know I've
Let's
been out there. Obviously, you have not. But my initial thought just seeing him out there, Jim, is that he does give you the physicality and the size. And he just looks like somebody, okay, I look at him and I say, that guy can take, a handful of carries off of JT and still churn out a few yards for you and keep your offense on schedule.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you and we'll pivot with you me taking on the role of the host here as I ask you questions about camp. Um Give us a scouting report like on the Seth McGowan. I'm sure there's people who probably knew it, when they were during the draft time and you wrote about it after the draft, but like probably haven't thought much about like how big is he? Like I can I can give those numbers. Now he's 6 foot 223 and ran a 4.49 40. So like, but give the scouting report as to how you feel like what his strengths are going to be, what his weaknesses are going to be, and like if he does win the number two job, what he can add that maybe the Colts didn't have in the past. That's I guess. Or and again, like do you feel like he's starting to earn that place of we can give him 2 to 3 series a game while giving Jonathan Taylor those series off to kind of to make sure he keep his legs fresh. Do you think he's earning that spot?
I do think he's earning that spot. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because we have a few more practices to get to. We got some joint practices coming up. I'll be heading to Boston next week in the New England area for a joint practice with the Patriots. But right now, today, Jim, and I'll have a piece coming out for the listeners and for the subscribers to the Athletic about, who's raising their stock, who's lowering their stock, just kind of a camp report here soon. But I guess you get a little tease here. I think that he's the number two running back. And I think it's pretty clear to me that this is somebody who, in my opinion, has earned a decent amount of respect, even early on with this group. He's got a physical running style. When the pads have come on in training camp, I think he's a guy who's shown up in pads. He's not, and shout out to Rick Venturi, who I shadowed earlier this week. I encourage you all to check out that piece with the longtime Colts coach and analyst, and basically just a football lover and lifer. He mentioned this, that he's not a jitterbug. He's a one cut guy. And so there's not a whole lot of finesse to his game. He's not a wiggle guy, but he's a decisive guy. He's a big guy, and he's violent. And I think if you're looking at those strengths, that pairs well with just trying to keep, again, your offense humming and taking some of those hits off of JT. Because I don't mind, and none of us do, if we get to the fourth quarter and it's just, hey, JT, you ain't coming off this field. But it's okay, where in that first, second, third can you alleviate some of that pressure you're putting on number 28? And I do think that Seth McGowan, who wears number 20, is one of those guys. Weaknesses, I would say, like most young running backs, it comes with pass protection. Can they
Okay.
trust you to protect Daniel Jones? Now, I think that he's done okay so far throughout training camp, nothing to write home about, but I also want to see it, and we'll see it ourselves, not with Daniel Jones at quarterback, I assume, because he'll probably not play in the preseason, but in these preseason games and these joint practices, how does he hold up when these teams start sending those blitzes and sending some looks perhaps he hasn't really seen in a live game setting or as close to a game setting as he can get? Because that, to me, will determine pretty much everything. Like, they won't put you out there. I know this for a fact. They will not put you on that field if they feel like you're going to lead to the quarterback getting hurt or getting hit because you don't know which way to slide in your protections and things like that. So I put him over DJ Giddens, 2025 fifth round pick for right now. Giddens missed one of the practices with an illness, or I'm sorry, I think might have been a hamstring. By the way, he was sidelined for a day, and he's had some issues dropping the ball to the backfield when it comes to just catching the ball. I think Seth McGowan has shown he can catch the ball as well. So I think there's a little bit of gap there. I'm not saying it's over, it's done, but the leader, I think a clear leader in the dughouse right now is Seth McGowan out of Kentucky.
Interesting. Interesting. I would. I mean, I think they probably could use somebody to be the primary pass catching back. It's still not exactly what Jonathan Taylor does his best. Like I said,
Right.
we talked about how he is one of the best running backs in football. If there is a weakness to Jonathan Taylor's game, it's I actually think he's gotten better in pass protection over the last few years. Like that wasn't a strength of his game. I think he's
Yeah,
improved
last year he
there.
was actually like pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. I think I remember watching and being like, oh, like there's some stuff. I don't know if that was something like maybe Daniel Jones has helped like pointing things out, or maybe it's just, he's been in the league for 5, 6 years now that he's just getting better at it and has learned more. But I definitely think, I mean, playing next to a veteran quarterback who can point things out and tell you where to be and here's what this is coming. Like he hadn't, he didn't have that with Anthony Richardson, right? Like that's a guy that was still kind of learning the NFL. So maybe that helped him in that way. But I do think that like the best time to take Jonathan Taylor off the field if you're gonna is going to be those third down situations where he's
Yeah.
just not going to be. He's not like such a great pass protector that you have to keep him on the field. He's not such a great receiver. He's not going to be out running. He's not one of those guys you can like split out and have run routes or anything like that. He can catch swing passes, screens, things like that.
Right.
But like you're not going to do that a lot with him. So if you have somebody who can kind of fill that role, the Colts fans listening, older Colts, not I guess not that old, but like the Naheem Hines role, right? Like the guy who
Yeah.
can run those Texas routes or little slant routes, or like it's things that he's a legitimate pass catching option that linebackers have to account for in the flats or over the middle of the field. So I'd like to know if Giddens maybe ends up with that role. Is that do you think that's where he could maybe slot himself in? I don't know if
I
he's a good
do
enough
think
pass
that.
protector.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do think he could be that, and he is a little more twitchy and
Yeah.
shifty than Seth McGowan. But again, I just wonder, okay, if some of your skill set is for you to catch the ball out of the backfield, you got to be able to do it. And he's had a couple of moments throughout camp where I just think it's mental. It's not like he's not in the right spot or something like that. It's just see the ball into your hands, turn upfield, and give yourself a chance to make a play. So
Okay.
we'll see kind of how that shakes out. But at the same time, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, Jim, he is also playing with, at times, the backup quarterbacks. And that whole situation doesn't always lend itself to the most accurate passes or things like that.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that next and tie it into the story that you wrote for this morning, which was kind of following around Rick Venturi. And I thought, obviously, Rick's the best. I mean, I got to know Rick a little bit when I was covering the team. I love that he is. That's what I think I use I mean, people who read you consistently and read the Athletic consistently will know that I use unfiltered pretty much every time for him, just
Yeah, he
because
is.
Rick's like one of the kind of guys that you that's what you're getting. What
Yeah.
he's going to tell you exactly how it is. And so I always appreciate that about him. And so I thought there were a couple of comments from that I wanted to kind of push you on to see what you thought and what he thought. The first one was about Anthony Richardson and about not wanting to give up on him and trade him. I think, again, we weren't there in the conversation. You can maybe tell us more of like the context of it, but it felt like in the quote that you put in the story, it said, don't trade him. And now I think he probably more meant like, don't trade him for nothing, essentially. Like I
Right.
said, if they're getting a second round pick, of course you do it, but a seventh round pick, you don't want to do it kind of a thing. It sounds like what he was saying, but I just am curious, like he doesn't seem to have jumped off the bandwagon yet. There's a few people left on the Anthony Richardson bandwagon, and it sounds like Rick might be one of them. And I was wondering, is that what it seems like to you? And why do you think that is?
Yes, he is definitely still a believer in AR. And I think it's more so from, like you said, A, we don't want to just give him away for nothing.
Mm,
And B, it's kind of an insurance plan. Like, hey, Daniel Jones is coming off the Achilles. So if he misses a game or two, or if he gets banged up like he has throughout his career, he made it a point, Jim, to point it out. And I didn't include every single quote, but he probably said it about 3 times that people forget that AR is a winning quarterback.
mm-hmm.
He's won games in this league.
True.
And so others might push back and say, well, the completion percentage is this. He's had turnover issues. He's had injury issues of his own. Can he still see? Things like that. Like, that's all a factor. But I think that for Venturi's purposes, he's just thinking to himself, what can we do to help this team right now today? And he doesn't think that getting rid of AR helps this team. And I would probably be in the same boat, mainly because I just don't think the value of a seventh round pick really helps you
Sure.
if your main quarterback has had durability issues pretty much his entire career. Now, I will say the direct quote that I used came after AR threw a perfect pass to the sideline to Deion Burks, and it draws you back in a little bit because you're like, man, like that throw was awesome. But then there's other times where I think throughout camp, there's been a couple of days where his passes have been high. His feet, which he's worked on, it still isn't there enough. And Jim, I'm not a doctor, and we haven't talked to the backup quarterbacks just yet throughout camp. We should get them sometime soon, but he's had snap issues. And I get that every snap to him hasn't been his fault. There's been some bad snaps overall, but sometimes the snap is fine and he's just dropped it. And he's probably dropped, and I'm not exaggerating, 5 or 6 throughout the first 5 training camp practices. That's a lot. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
that to me is an issue that probably even now I get like not giving up on AR, but even now, Jim, I know we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I would probably still put Riley Leonard above him on the depth chart just because, yes, AR gives you the wild plays, but Riley gives you just more stability. And even though he hasn't had a great camp, I don't think either one has. I just think that Riley's just less volatile and less unpredictable. And therefore, if you're going to go with somebody because Daniel isn't available, it probably is Riley.
We're getting to the point, because I don't think we have the exact date. I'm not sure where we would find it, and maybe we're not doing our jobs here on
Yeah,
the.
trust me, I'm digging. I'm digging.
I
I'm
was
getting
gonna
ghosted,
say
man. I haven't been ghosted like this, since like high school. Ugh.
Anthony Richardson, it had essentially his bonus kicked in, or will kick in, has kicked in, is going to kick in at some point here, where essentially the Colts have to give him what about $4 million, right, of his
Yes.
$5 million salary this year, and then he'll be on the hook only for like $1 million for the rest of the year. Again, these are
Right.
approximate numbers,
This
but
is
the
for a
idea
team
is,
that trades for him. Like if a team were to trade for him after his bonus kicks in, his roster bonus, they would only have to pay him $1 million, which in theory, would make him a more enticing player to trade for if you give up a 6th round pick and all you got to do is pay up sixth, 7th round pick and all you got to do is pay $1 million.
That's what, so I guess my thought is like once that happens, if it hasn't already, and then I think we'll maybe need to marry that with like a backup quarterback injury or even a starting quarterback injury where a backup is thrust into the starting role. Then maybe there starts to become a more discernible market for what a Anthony
Yeah,
Richardson trade could look like, especially if what you're saying is Riley Leonard's taking is, not like I say is taking control of the battle for QB2, but is starting to take the lead in the battle for QB2. Maybe that's when the Colts become more open to the idea of like, okay, well, we have Riley Leonard. People
yeah,
might be showing interest in Richardson. We might be willing to pull the trigger for whatever it ends up being. Again, a fifth, 6th round pick, whatever it ends up being. I don't get your hopes up, Colts fans, is what I would say. But I know, Chris Ballard says they don't want to just give him away. I totally get that. But like, I think Richardson obviously has his trade request in. It hasn't been rescinded, as you've pointed out
no,
a couple of times. Like, I think it's going to be best for everybody if he's not the QB2 to send him somewhere where he can start over, really start
yeah,
fresh. I think that's what he needs probably. So interesting to see. We'll have obviously. I know you'll be keeping tabs on that. We'll check back in on the quarterback battle. The other thing about this is less rostery, um, but more just like Rick's interpretation. And I think he talks to a lot of people within the Colts and on the team, and I think he has a pretty good understanding of what's going on there. I thought one of the last quotes he had in your story, the interpretation of what Carly Ursay-Gordon said about Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. I'm going to read
yeah.
it. It says everybody knows Carly has basically put everyone on notice, rightfully so. We're either going to see the very best of everybody this year or the very worst. I will say, like when I saw the Carly Ursay-Gordon quotes from last week, was it last? Yeah, it was last week. Yeah, last
Yep.
Friday. Um, I didn't I can't say I got the impression that it was like a or else do or die season, though I think we've all thought that. But it seems like Rick interpreted it that way, and I was curious what you made of that, or at least like, did you think that he's reading too much into the quote? Do you feel like maybe he knows a little something more? I'm just curious what you thought, and I see you looking at your phone, and I'm only laughing because I saw a second ago that the Colts made the extension with Jonathan Taylor official, which means I'll have to update our story here to take sources out of some of it because now
Yeah,
it's
you work
official.
so hard for those sources, and then you got guys like Jim that just take it out.
Well,
But
to be clear, we'll leave some of it in because they didn't announce either the years or they didn't announce
right,
the term. They didn't
the
announce the terms.
terms,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so yeah,
yeah,
so yeah.
exactly. But no, I looked at his interpretation of it. Jim is someone who's kind of been in that position before. Like you're going into a season where okay, if we don't perform, we could be out of here. So maybe there's a little bit of just knowledge that the common person doesn't have. And then on top of that, when I'm looking at just the stakes of this season, I just go back to the fact that Chris Ballard is going into the final year of his deal. And even with a guy like Shane Steichen, who is not going into the final year of his deal, he's 25 and 26 through his first 3 years. I get it. He hasn't had the same quarterback for an entire season, his entire tenure. He's dealt with major injuries, especially last season when they were rolling. I get all of that, but it's kind of hard to justify bringing a coach back who, by the way, may not have made the playoffs in his first 4 years. Not many coaches get to keep their jobs amid starts like that. So I think that he was pretty much spot on. Like, yeah, Carly Ursay-Gordon won't come out and just be as blunt as him, but this is why I love Rick. He ain't going nowhere. Whether somebody else is, he'll be here, this time next year, out on the grass, making sure that he's watching, the offensive and defensive line one-on-ones and things like that. So that was kind of my takeaway from it, Jim. And on top of that, I just think that there's so much riding on this season and for them to perform, which again, to tie it all together, that's why you go all in on JT. That's why you
Right.
bring back Daniel Jones and you retain Alec Pierce, who by the way is still out. And from what Shane kind of told us or not told us this week, it doesn't sound like he's that close to getting back on the grass. So, assuming he gets healthy and he's out available for the season, that's why you make these investments is because you want to try to see what you can do. But the one investment you haven't really made is to that front office, to the guy who's kind of orchestrated all this. So this to me, and I get it, we've said it every year, oh, it's do or
Hmm.
die. But I do think that without that extension on the table for Chris Ballard,
Yeah.
final year of his contract, this is as real as it's ever going to be. This is as tangible as it's ever going to be to quote unquote pressure and the
Yeah.
stakes and whatever you else want to call it.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up with a little a check in with a Hall of Famer here, but well, I shouldn't say we're checking in with him. I suppose we're just going to talk about him. He's not. We're not going to be talking to Adam Vinatieri today.
That's what we have Zach Kiefer for.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. No, what I was going to ask you about was just a now that they've gotten the Jonathan Taylor deal done, I think you and I were like placing bets and talking about not placing bets, but we're talking about who's going to get a deal done. Do we think? I think you asked me on 1.5 extensions done before the start of the season,
Oh yeah.
and I don't know. I don't remember what exactly we said, but I think we both agreed they were going to get Quentin done, and we were debating about obviously Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor. Well, we know the answer on the Jonathan Taylor one, so I guess my question is, where do you think that leaves us on Quentin Nelson and Josh Downs going forward?
If I had to guess, I'm gonna say no on Josh Downs because we had a chance to talk to him on the Fan Morning Show on 107.5 The Fan, Jim. And I talked to you about it afterwards. He more or less said before the start of training camp that he would like the opportunity to kind of boost his stock. I think if he signed a deal now, especially given like we just talked about the Zay Flowers deal, he's not Zay Flowers, but seeing some of these deals come in, if he has, let's say an 800-yard season, 5 touchdowns, and he does that as a second or third option, that's a solid year. I think that he could definitely command more money than if he were to sign right now, coming off of a year in which he had less than 600 receiving yards, a career
Sure.
low. I think it was 566, the official number. So I don't think anything gets done with him, partly because he may not want to do something right now. But with Quentin, that's a unique one. I did ask him last week about his contract, and in typical Quentin fashion, he did not want to talk about himself at all. And he said he hasn't had any contact with the Colts. And when he says he, I think he literally means himself, not his
Yes.
representation. I think that would be bad representation to not be lobbying on the behalf of your Hall of Fame left guard to get a new deal done. But he strikes me as someone who would still want to be here. I don't get the inkling that he, wants to bolt next year in free agency.
Hmm.
So I would say he gets a deal done as well.
Okay.
And I get it. You probably look and say, is he scheme proof? I mean, not scheme proof. I'm sorry. Is he GM proof? Like, is he regime proof? Does a new general manager perhaps, if this season goes awry, come in next year and say, why are you paying this left guard all this money? And we have money to spend or don't have money to spend at premium positions at other places. But I just think you have to reward a guy who is quite literally the greatest offensive lineman in your team's history. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler through his first 8 years. Only other guy who's done that in NFL history through his first 8 years is Joe Thomas as a lineman. So that guy, Hall of Famer for the Browns. You look at him falling off. What was he last year? A second team All Pro. Like, wow, that really shows his decline. Like, I mean, he's still the premier left guard in the league and someone who's vital to the success of your quarterback, to the success of your offense. And as you pointed out in an earlier podcast, I want to say we did pretty recently, Jim, the run game. Like,
Yeah.
that's the other part of it. Like, it's not just pass protection. He is, as Shane kind of described to me, a skill position player. Like, he's that mobile, he's that agile, he's that unique where you can get him out in space and he creates different things that you just can't do with other linemen. So I think you get, now that JT's done, the more I would say argue debatable one, then you get it done with Quentin Nelson as well. And that's probably it when it comes to contract negotiations and things like that. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that I'm right? Or do you think that Quentin might look at this and say, I want to see how we do?
Yeah, that's the only thing I was going to say. I don't think that. Let me be clear. I think he would sign a deal if it was the right offer and all that stuff. Because I think Quentin Nelson is the kind of guy. Like, remember, this guy went to college in Notre Dame. Like, Indiana is his home, you know. So in a lot of ways now, um, I think he's the kind of guy that will want to stay with one organization throughout his entire career. Um, the guy that drafted him, Chris Ballard. That's my instinct. That's my gut. I mean, I got to cover Quentin for a few years there. That's how I know him. Um, but I wouldn't blame him if this year if he doesn't sign an extension and he wants to see how the year goes and they blow things up and he wants to go chance to chase the championship somewhere else before he's not at the top of his game. Wouldn't blame him at all. Truly, I really wouldn't. So I think that's probably I don't know if I in my head if you were breaking it down like does he want to stay in Indy or does he want to have that kind of flexibility? In my head, it's more like an 80-20, 90-10. Like Quentin's just wants to stay in Indianapolis. But
Yeah.
I don't know him. I don't know the inner workings of his mind. Maybe he is considering leaving. So I don't think so. And then, yeah, as you pointed out, I don't think Josh Downs is. I don't think it makes sense for either. I mean, actually, honestly, I think it makes sense for the Colts to try to sign him to extension now while he's cheaper. As you saw with
Right.
the receiver market is kind of crazy sometimes. So signing him now would be a smart business for them. But if I'm Josh Downs, I think I know I'm in for maybe a big year. So I'm not eager to sign anything that's like below market value at this point. So all right, as I talked about earlier, we don't have a ton to talk about here, but just maybe a PSA for people that, and Zach Kiefer wrote a nice story, kind of a retrospective about for Adam
Yeah.
Vinatieri's career. He sometimes I forget all the records that this man holds, and like I mean, obviously, like I don't think you forget the clutch kicks. I think everybody remembers those, the Super Bowl winning kicks, the one in the snow, I remember like that the fact that he like single footedly beat the Ravens in that one playoff game for Peyton Manning and they couldn't get in the end zone, but he kicked I think 5 field goals in that game. Like it was fun to read through all the stuff with that Zach had written. About that, but like truly just remembering that he's like I was looking it up. He's the all-time points leader in NFL history, and no one's gonna catch him for a while. Like Nick Folk is the only one that's like he's like 11th. He's like I think he's like 400 or 500 points behind. I'm sorry. Here, I'll give you the actual number. Adam Vinatieri is at 2,673. The closest active kicker is Atlanta's Nick Folk with 1,826. So he's actually 800 points behind. So no one's in jeopardy of catching him anytime soon. So he is rightfully going to the NFL Football Hall of or Pro Football Hall of Fame. I always forget it's not the NFL Hall of Fame,
Yeah,
Pro
you're
Football
fine.
Hall of Fame. And yeah, I mean, things ended weird with the Colts, I think, but I happily, I will say, like 5 years gives everybody some time and grace and away from the way things ended, and you can remember this is the time to remember only the good parts and the fact that
Yeah.
he has a case to be made as one of probably the greatest kicker of all time.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And I'll end with this, Jim. He will be presented by Carly Ursay Gordon. He did say in a video the Colts released that had Jim Ursay still been here, he would have had Jim do it. And Jim actually did it for a few players. And it just
Hmm.
speaks to the level of love and care and just togetherness that the Ursays have kind of had with their players, regardless of the generations, And so I think that this is a cool opportunity to celebrate that with the Hall of Fame game happening tonight and him getting inducted this weekend. So it'll be busy for Carly Ursay Gordon and company, but a good kind of busy for one of the greatest players to ever play this game and the greatest kicker, obviously in Colts history and in Patriots history. I guess he's the only guy who gets love in both areas from both franchises and both fan bases. So on that note, we'll check in with you all very, very soon. Thanks for rocking with us as camp rolls on.